Chapter 4. Karn stood in the whirling red beam. Overhead, Malzra's machine turned back the tide of time. It was Karn's third trial in as many months. Each test reached only hours farther back in time. Each produced greater temporal stress across his frame. The current envelope was a regression of 18 hours, beyond which lay almost certain meltdown. Karn told himself he should be getting used to the vertiginous moment when the gearwork of the universe ground to a halt and then began slowly to turn backward. There was an instant of spinning wheels and whines of protest before time's conveyor reversed. Then came sudden acceleration. Baron and Malzra were freed from their immobility, and alien physics took hold. Effect became cause, memories became prophecies, and silver men were disassembled to gulping laughter. Now, as the spool of time rewound, space shifted as well. Within his red cone of light, Karn slid slowly sideways. He jittered through steel engines and furnace casings, his physical form out of phase with the atomic synchronicity around him. In moments, he slipped past the laboratory wall and out into the corridor. He saw himself strolling backward down the hall beside Joyra. She had accompanied him to the lab, talking of her volcanic home island and how she missed her tribe. Joyra and Karn had become fast friends in the last months. She was a mental giant, and he was a metal one. Whenever Karn was not in the lab and Joyra was not studying or sleeping, the two were together. She had taught him to skip stones, which he could do with rocks the size of bread loaves. He had let her ride on his back as he climbed the eastern pinnacles. From the top of the jutting stones, they had seen ships so distant that only their topsails showed above the horizon. Joyra had shared with Karn her many impressive clockwork inventions, toy birds and frogs and leaf hoppers, and fixed a finger servo that had burnt out after one of his secret tests. He had borrowed her drafting tools one evening when she fell asleep mid-conversation and had drawn a crudely elegant portrait of her. Best of all, they had made a home for each other, a refuge from the grueling rigors of their posts at the academy and from the depredations of a certain 14-year-old menace. Karn and his pool of red light drifted out of the other side of the corridor. He moved through a set of tutorial rooms. Some were dark and vacant, others were crowded with tutors, students, and artifact constructs. Many of these structures were basic forms meant to teach the principles of artifice to young scholars. More advanced devices could make beds, tie bootlaces, or scuttle like cockroaches. The most mobile of these creations were used by some of the senior students in elaborate off-hour stakes races. Some elite machines were designed to slither into the cells of the opposite-sex students to spy for their makers. For every such offensive device, there were 3 defensive ones that could detect, disable, or outright destroy the offender. The highest-level creations, though, the sort Joyra spent her days designing and building, were complex components for Master Malzra's time-travel device. He had dozens of his oldest and most promising students working on the project, though none of them knew the ultimate end of the devices they designed. Onward went the time traveler in his vessel of light. He saw into lecture halls, slid through a sleeping student lying sick and alone in her cell, tore past a pyrotechnic display on the properties of coal dust, and drifted through Malzra's private study. Books and models lined the walls, diagrams and studies hung on stands. In their midst, across a table piled with ancient manuscripts, Baron and Malzra argued heatedly. Karn drifted beyond those walls as well. He emerged into early morning into the Academy's gardens and past the 12-foot-thick outer wall. Then he moved through forests. Leaves twirled in odd backward spirals to sucking winds. The sun retreated to disappear below the horizon. Through a vast and settling darkness, Karn glided out toward the distant western shore. It was a place he and Joyra never explored on their rambles, keeping themselves to the pinnacles in the east. Karn slid through the tree trunks and boulders, even long, low shoulders of earth at the edge of the island. Afterward, the ground fell away. A series of rough steps rambled down to the sea. In what seemed mere moments, the foamy verge of ocean passed some 50 feet beneath Karn's dangling feet. The water seemed to boil, ever receding from the toothy shore. He floated outward. Morning deepened into night. The glimmer moon quit the sky. Black midnight shimmered with twilight. He was hot. He was nearing the edge of the envelope, 18 hours back and 5 miles in space. The plan had been for Malzra and Baron to monitor the temporal stresses on the portal device and recall Karn before he reached meltdown. That wasn't happening. Already his silver chest plates ground against each other in feverish expansion. Still, he drifted outward. The red pool of light suddenly shimmered out of existence around him. Flailing to stay upright, Karn plunged, as massive and hot as a meteor. Overhead, the sky was starry but moonless. The ocean below was black with night and deep. It roared up to meet him. Flecked waves seized his leg, sent jets of steam from the golem's sizzling hide, and dragged him under. For several long moments, Karn was enveloped in a fine cloud of steam bubbles, and then he slipped down out of the foamy stuff and sank through cold, viscous dark. Sandy silt sifted up around him, and then his feet struck the benthos at the bottom. For a few moments, he simply stood there, feeling salt water wriggling past all of his plates and into the interior spaces of his being. Surely they would recall him now. He needed only wait. Still, with each creeping moment, he felt his temporal displacement draining away. He would soon be in phase with the particles of this time continuum, solid and seeable to anyone who might look. Best not to give anyone a chance. He would remain where he was until recalled. An hour passed. The last pockets of air in him had seeped out and escaped to the surface some 50 feet above. He'd been bumped 3 times by an inquisitive serpent and had given up hope of being automatically recalled. Perhaps he was out of range. He would have to find his own way out. Luckily, among his capacities were an internal clock, compass, and sextant, not that he could see any stars. Even so, with the various improvements Malzra had made to all these systems, Karn had almost foolproof direction sense. He set out, slogging toward the island. It took longer than he anticipated. There were numerous submerged sandbars to climb and other pits to descend into. There was also a coral reef that was too fragile to climb over and too extensive to circumnavigate. He ended up having to smash through, the sharp animal accretion scarring his silvery knuckles. It was midnight when his head finally cleared the water. Constellation spangled the sky over the Black Island. In the extreme distance, the Academy glowed, a collection of ivory jewel boxes. Within those walls, his other self, his historic self, would be spending the night in voluntary deactivation. Within those walls, Joyra and Teferi slept, and Malzra and Baron no doubt pondered the upcoming spatial temporal trial. The wrapping walls of that school held everything in the world to Karn, and the rest of the island was dark, save for that one dim glint near the brow of the sea cliff. The light was so small he had first taken it to be a distant star. Marking its position, Karn emerged from the water and strode up the sloping shore. Water disgorged itself by the gallon from his sloshing innards. He stood and let the purge continue. What about that light? No one was allowed beyond the walls after dark. Who could be in that niche? Karn climbed. The rocky cliffside before him was all too easy to ascend after the dragging depths of the sea. In sliding, scraping moments, he had reached the peak. Ahead, in a deep, narrow cleft of stone, the light shone tepidly forth. Karn strode toward it. It suddenly went out. He paused, allowing his eyes to adjust to the starry darkness. Something moved in that space, something warm. Karn made out a peering, squinting face and the glint of stars from a small steel blade. The figure withdrew again into the cave. Karn started forward, his massive feet grinding quietly over the gravel-covered ground. The person in the cave reappeared, hoisting a curved stick. There came a thrumming sound. Something, a crude arrow, darted swiftly out to strike Karn's hide. Metal rang with the sound of stone cracking. A shattered shaft tumbled away to one side. A hostile act. A caveman living on the edge of Talaria. An intruder. Karn set his jaw and marched toward the cave. 2 more arrows struck the golem and cracked off into the rocks. He came on, furious. The man abandoned his bow for a large stone-tipped club. He bounced it in his hand, growled out a wordless warning, and squinted into the night. Karn strode to the figure and swiped out to capture him, but the man was too fast, spinning from his grasp. The club descended, its stone tip shattered and sprayed outward. The hardwood handle jangled in the man's grasp. Karn whirled. He caught the man with the back of one hand and flung him into the ground. The body sprawled against an outcrop of rock and lay still. Light flared to Karn's side. He spun. Flames roared over him. Fire sizzled away the water in his joints. He lunged past the flame and the second attacker. Arms limed in flame. Karn surged into the cave. "Karn!" came a shout of surprise and relief. "What are you doing here?"
"Joyra?"
Karn asked. His eyes quickly adjusted to the darkness. Joyra trembled in her nightclothes, a smoldering torch butt held in her hand. She must have used the brand to ignite airborne coal dust, as the students were taught at the academy. Karn blurted,
"What are you doing here?"
Joyra's face grew resentful and desperate. "You followed me? I can't believe you followed me."
"I didn't follow you,"
Karn protested. "Why did you leave the school grounds at night then? What about the curfew?" Joyra challenged.
"I could ask the same of you,"
countered Karn. "Where is Carrick? What have you done?" she demanded suddenly, and stumbled past Karn to the mouth of the cave. She felt around blindly in the dark until her hand settled on the leg of the man. She shook him. "Are you all right? Can you hear me?" The man did not move. Karn approached.
I'll carry him inside.
No, insisted Joyra, shoving past him and clambering into the cave. His neck might be broken. Moving him might kill him. She lit up the lantern, gathered gauze and supplies from a shelf, and hurried back out. Kneeling beside the fallen man, she let out a moan of worry. One hand reached to stroke his curly golden hair. No blood, and he's breathing. She gritted her teeth as her fingers encountered a large lump on his forehead. You banged him up pretty good.
Who is he?
Karn asked suspiciously.
What is he doing here?
He is Carrick, said Joyra with a sigh. She probed his neck to check for injury or swelling. He was trying to protect me.
He's not a student,
Karn observed. No, he's a castaway and he's my friend. She slipped her arms under the man, lifted him, and carried him inside. Get the lantern, will you, Karn? The golem complied, following like a dejected dog.
You never told me about him.
Joyra settled the man onto the pallet in one corner of the niche. I never told anyone Master Mulzer would have him killed.
But we are friends. We have no secrets from each other,
Karn said. He set the lantern on the makeshift table. We have secrets. You won't tell me what experiments you are involved with.
Master Mulzer forbade me.
Joyra smiled grimly, dipping a cloth in a pitcher of water and applying it to the lump on Carrick's head. Master Mulzer forbade me or anyone from harboring castaways, too. So it all comes down to Master Mulzer. I keep secrets from you because of him, and you keep secrets from me because of him. It's just the way he wants it. He doesn't want any of us to have friends, to have lives. Karn felt a wave of sick dread move through him. He remembered what his existence had been like before meeting Joyra, caught between the quiet apathy of Mulzer and the loud antipathy of Teferi. This moment could ruin things between him and Joyra. This moment could cost Karn the only friend he had and turn him back into Artie's shovelhead.
Time travel,
Karn blurted, his voice anguished.
That's what Master Mulzer is testing. That is why I'm here. He's testing a device that will send me back centuries or millennia, that will transport me anywhere across the planet.
Joyra stopped her ministrations and stared in amazed wonder at the golem. That's why he called you a probe?
It is the whole reason I have been created,
Karn said soberly.
He instructed me to tell no one about this, on pain of being dismantled.
If he can do this, he can change history.
He doesn't want me to change history.
Karn suddenly realized he might be changing history even at this moment. There's much more to Master Mulzer than meets the eye, Joyra noted, amazed.
Well,
said Karn, kneeling before Joyra in the wan light of the lantern.
That is the only secret I have kept from you. You know everything else about me. You have studied all my plans. You have watched Mulzer assemble me. You even gave me my name. My life. Can you forgive me? Can we still be friends?
A smile that was one part joy and one part pity broke across her face. Of course, Karn. You know my greatest secret now, too. I've always trusted you. I still trust you, Karn. You're my only real friend in the world.
What is he?
Karn asked, indicating the unconscious man. He is my love. She had no sooner spoken those words than the shimmering tug of temporal displacement laid hold of Karn. He shuddered, shifted out of phased, turned incorporeal, and felt the sudden swift sliding of red light. Just before he spun away through the stone wall of the niche, he glimpsed, behind the wondering face of Joyra, one of Carrick's fingers draw inward and his eye slit open. It's worth the effort, Urza insisted where he sat in his high study. The Thran became the Phyrexians. If we can divert them from that course, keep them on the path of artifice, rather than mutation, we can save the whole world. Baron held his hand out and paused, seeming to sniff the air. What was that? Did you feel that? A temporal anomaly, Urza said. They have been occurring since we first sent the probe through the time travel portal. That one was stronger than most. A temporal anomaly? Baron repeated, stunned. This is what I'm talking about. We get anomalies like this when sending someone back 18 hours. What will happen beyond that? We must stop the Thran from becoming Phyrexians. But millennia? If we could reach that far back in time, you could take a few side trips and rectify all your own past mistakes, leading the Phyrexians to Sarah's plane, attacking Phyrexia, blowing up Argoth, killing your brother. What? You could even decide to undiscover the Power Stones at Koilos and keep the Phyrexians from re-entering Dominari at all. Urza's look was sober. That is what my life's accomplishment amounts to, in your eyes? One grand failure after another? Of course not, assured Baron. You've done much good, and I do not begrudge you your mistakes. Mages also learn through trial and error. What I begrudge you is the fact that you never take responsibility for your errors. You don't learn from your mistakes. You never clean up after yourself. That's what I'm trying to do now. I brought the Phyrexians back into the world. Now I'm trying all I can to find out how to drive them from it forever, Urza said. I have learned, but I have much more to learn before I can right this greatest wrong. Yes, agreed Baron. You have much more to learn. Missing the intent of this comment, Urza said, I have seen one piece of the puzzle, but I don't know where it fits yet. Have you noticed the pendant Karn wears? Baron gave a wave of his hand. A little lizard on a chain? Have you noticed how hard the metal is? I tested its hardness. It scratched steel and adamantine and diamond. What's more, it doesn't heat up at all from temporal stress. Baron blinked, considering. What are you saying, that we should build another probe made of this metal? Perhaps. Perhaps. Urza's eyes glinted with possibilities. I'll have to ask Karn where he got it. If we could forge a probe out of it, should we work out a treaty with the makers of the metal? Baron asked sarcastically. Or just take over their homeland and drive them out? Start with a treaty, of course. There's always time for conquest later. Baron was grim. Under his breath, he said, Yes, you have much to learn. In a few months, the spatial displacement capacities of the time machine had been perfected. On one journey, Karn arrived in the Adakar Wastes, thousands of miles from Talaria. The place was little more than a brittle blue sky above a brittle white land. Snow and ice covered most of the ground. Bare spots revealed sand that had fused together into great thin slabs of glass, left from a long-ago battle of fire. When Karn arrived, this time without the disconcerting fall from the sky, the land was cracked sheet of glass, sand fused in furnace-like heat. At Malzer's request, Karn gathered shards and brought them back with him. Malzer tested the samples. He declared them indeed to be from the Adkar Wastes. He was very pleased with this result and planned to go even further with the next trial. Meanwhile, the rills of temporal distortion grew worse. At first, these disturbances were subtle and few, slight time lags passing through the air like mild tremors. The frequency of the episodes gradually increased, from once a week to once a day. The severity went from mere hiccups to lapses that spanned 4 or 5 heartbeats. Words lagged behind lips. Music lurched up and out of tune. Carillion crews became hopelessly jangled. Goblets were overfilled or dropped. Unbound folios turned traitor in the fingers of tutors and fanned out on the floor. Flames devoured hunks of meat on the grill while neighboring steaks remained raw. These were minor annoyances only, especially to a creature like Karn without heartbeat or breath to get tangled up. Some of the more infirm tutors, though, had to ride out these time storms by folding to their knees and gasping for breath. As the bands of distortion deepened and grew more common, the school infirmary filled up. It disturbed Karn. The next time he was called for a time trial, 2 months later, he brought up his concerns.
I am not like you, Karn noted. That's why you made me, because creatures like you cannot safely move through time distortions. Each time I regress through the machine, more time leaks occur, and bigger ones.
Master Malzra studied the golem keenly. The founder of the academy always had a strange intensity in his face and a scintillating focus in his eyes, as though he could see centuries of time crystallized into mere moments. Are these time leaks harming you? Baron glanced up from the console he prepared. He nodded approvingly at Karn, nudging him to continue.
Not me,
Karn replied.
But everyone else. They're not safe. You have a lot of aging scholars here, and a lot of young children. You're responsible—
Have there been any serious injuries? Interrupted the master, his eyes flashing like twin gemstones.
Not yet. But if we continue these experiments, there will be injuries and perhaps deaths across the whole island.
Another nod came from the mage. Malzra blinked, astonished. If we don't continue these experiments, there will be injuries and deaths across the whole world. You don't understand, Karn. You have lived mere moments. You have seen only 100 square miles of land. I have lived millennia. I have seen worlds and worlds of worlds. There are evils at the door, Karn, evils beyond anything you can imagine. I alone know that they're there and knocking. I alone am devising a way to keep them forever out or destroy them when they get in. I alone stand between this world and utter destruction, and you come to me like a nursemaid for these children and old dotards and demand they get goat's milk and nap time? Mage Baron dropped his gaze, head wagging softly. Karn stood for moments without responding. He believed, at long last, what Teferi had said about Malzra's paranoia. An impulse urged Karn to confront the man with his own tortured insanity, but the past months had taught him much about dealing with these strange, irrational creatures of flesh.
Yes, it's a lonely, dangerous struggle.
Baron looked up, impressed. One that might one day kill us all, he said in quiet reproof. Malzra took the comments as accord. Good. I'm glad you both agree. Now, Karn, before you get into the machine, I want you to leave that pendant with me. It may be interfering with the regression. Suspicious, Karn slowly lifted the pendant from his neck and surrendered it. Malzra looked over it keenly. Where did you get it? There was a greedy gleam in his eye. Karn opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught short. Malzra's mad raving still rang in his head. If the master started poking around in Joyra's room, he might find out her secret. She might be expelled, or worse.
I found it. It was snagged on a piece of driftwood that washed ashore.
A driftwood? Malzra said dubiously.
Driftwood,
Karn repeated. Shaking his head in irritation, Malzra said, Into the machine then, Karn. This time the regression took him to a scene of great carnage. The place was evil beyond Karn's imagining. Men, or what had once been men, lay in broken death across the grassy ground. Some were nearly complete, marked only by telltale roses of blood on their hearts or bellies. Others were missing limbs, likely dragged away by the wild dogs that loped shamelessly among the dead. Even less remained of some warriors. They had been torn in half by unimaginably sharp blades or blasted into fragments by fireballs. Smoldering war machines hulked on the horizon. The smell of waste, smoke, offal, maggots, and disease filled the air. Surely this devastation had been caused by the horrors and evils Malzra spoke of, the Silverman thought. Karn had never felt sick before, but now his silver bulk quivered as he, with a tarnish that reached to the very core of him. He had been asked to gather some sign of his journey, but he could not bring himself to pry a sword from the hand of a fallen man or pull loose the helm that had failed to save a life. Instead, Karn found a single shield, lying alone and bloodless on a wind-blown tuft of grass. This he lifted and held against him, waiting miserably for the master to recall him. When Karn returned, he sorrowfully presented the shield to Malzra. The master identified it, a bracer from New Argiv. To the Silverman's description of the battle, Malzra merely nodded grimly. A battle had occurred in that spot only 2 days before. Karn had regressed only a day and a half. The master was frustrated and angry. He brusquely handed the pendant back.
If these are the atrocities you spoke of, Master Malzra,
Karn said solemnly as he donned the amulet,
I understand now why you fight so hard.
Malzra's smile, an unusual sight, was sardonic. These atrocities are nothing, the result of human hatreds. What I fight is the hatred of demons. Sometimes I forget all Urza has seen, all he has done. The Silverman returned from New Argiv. We debriefed him and shut down the laboratory. That night during the reading session in Urza's study, he let the volume he was reading slide down to lie open on his lap. He stared straight ahead for some time. I lowered my book as well and waited. Urza's eyes had that faraway look, and I glimpsed the halves of the Mightstone and Weakstone showing through. Beyond the high windows, sea winds argued amongst the palms. I was fighting a whole world. Not just Gix, but a whole world. He murmured. Cautiously, I ventured. Fighting a whole world? In Phyrexia, I had gone to fight Gix, but there was a whole world of Gixes. Demons, witch engines, dragon engines, the living dead and the dead living. And at the heart of it all, a god, a dark, mad god. I wryly imagined the same description coming from an invader of Talaria. I fought to destroy a whole world, but Zancha, she fought only to regain her heart. I drew in a deep breath of sea wind. Yes, that one stone was a whole world to her. It is a whole world to Karn. A gleam of sudden realization shone in Urza's dark, ancient eyes. That's why they act the way they do. Who? The students, the tutors, even you and Karn. Every one of you is defending your own heart, your own world. He's not mad, not holy. He is ancient and inhuman, transformed by the millennia. But he's not wholly mad. Yes, I agreed. Don't you remember how it feels? It is lonely, dangerous struggle, one that will one day kill us all.
Baron.
Mage Master of Telaria.